Like if you don't have, oh, what happened?
Did I do it?
Oh, there we go. I hit something and you hit something. We both hit something at the same time, and there we go. All right. Okay.
This is awesome. Two operatives at work.
Right?
Making it happen.
All right.
Oh my gosh. Never gonna do that again.
Okay. So where do you want to start?
All right, so I had memories unlocked. This is a process.
Okay, just real quick. So the question I asked you before that was, how did you find yourself in a situation where you had the opportunity to have your memories unlocked?
That'll be part 2.
Okay, cool.
Which is 1 second away.
That's fine, go ahead.
So had them unlocked. It's something one reaches when they can make it through the trauma without dying, or not without dying, but just like without blacking out. Because that's the whole point. We've all seen it. We've all been there, but everybody out here blacks the information out because it's too intense. That's kind of how it works. That's also how they hide everything. It's basically right out in the open. And so then the whole idea is, though, that for the entire time, my entire life, which is also connected to what are known as inserted memories, there are basically these, which we're just going to call, because that's what the official name is. And the name tells it all. You know, if you really wonder one way or the other, the name tells you everything you need to know. But the secrets, what they call the secret space program. I'm getting crazy feedback. But, and so I've had those memories as well as training and conditioning and underground base memories my entire life. And so that was going on this entire time. And I simply got to the point where this is the next phase of it. The strangest thing is that the next phase of it is basically going public. Like that's what this phase of it entails. And that this could possibly be going public for the entire civilization to see, to witness, which is kind of intense because this is a one-time event. This is something we've been building up to for the entirety of the civilization, depending on, where you look at the interference and the influence and what's gone on. And I can go into that because it skewers perception because of the time-altering technology that's been involved to the point where it started in the 40s, 50s, 60s. But because of that, it began 1,000 or more years ago. And it all jumbles together like a big mind F, if you want to call it that. And so, and then on top of that, it's a one-time thing. It's going to influence the world. All this manipulation, all these events, it's been leading up to this unveiling. And in the same sense that the originating governments where this all took place, as well as, the American government, but it's not even American, because it came from before, from Project Paperclip and all these other factions and unions and nations and secret groups and funding powers and groups and knowledge groups and then the military groups, and they all joined in on this, and that was pretty much the point. But and then you got the other layers of reality, which is what it kind of comes down to. That is literally not just us; it's just convergence of multiple worlds. And so then the idea is that whatever does happen from this, whatever results from this, is going to change the entire civilization, no matter if you live in the jungles of Peru or if you're in London somewhere or if you're in Alabama. As long as you're by a road or connected to somewhere or some place where planes could fly over, you're going to see a drastic change in reality as a result of what's going to happen as far as the truth about these issues and topics coming to the public, which in a way pretty much denotes basically these operations, what have been termed, I like to term them even anyway. They're not secret operations, but they are secret operations. Secret projects is what I've always called them. They're referenced as the unacknowledged special access programs, and there's multiple subsets and divisions and It's really weird how it's all mapped out. It's like a big computer brain. And that's how you would have to map it out, because it's too confusing and it's almost convoluting of an organic mind to understand what's going on. Because, for instance, one group was to find out what another group is doing, and then the group that they're looking to find out what they're doing, their task is to stop the other group from finding out what they're doing. So it's like, how the fuck is this supposed to make sense to anybody's mind in the world? And then you have the oversight groups that are going to be watching both of them and pulling out what beneficial information they can in order to determine what groups and factions and operations will be born out of the information that they get from that.
Just a quick question. Is that also throw into that you have people, operatives, being used, tell me if I'm correct on this, in multiple of these programs, sometimes in projects where one project is trying to hide the project from the other project, but you have the same people the same subjects being used. Yes?
Basically, you have double agents within. There's a running joke that is basically a double agent program, that the program is spying on itself. That we send a double agent out that ends up coming back spying on us and giving us information about the group they're spying on, which is also ourselves. And like writing everything down, and it's a big game. That's literally the spy versus spy operations patch, which is I can't remember. I just call it the spy versus spy. I just looked at it the other day, and I remember they all have their phrases that's based upon that idea that there's the spy versus spy. They're shaking each other's hands. I'm not going to dare screenshot again. And they're shaking each other's hands, and each person has a bomb behind their back. And so it's the Special Forces ODA 071, I think, intelligence patch. And so 731. Weird stuff. But that entails the entirety of what was going on and what is going on. And then all the other weird patches do as well. Even those beings, if you think about what kind of beings those are, it entails that crazy feedback. But so yeah, so that's, it's not only like that sometimes happened, and it's like really like we really got to think about what we're doing here, because there's agents and this that. The whole thing is a big double agent meetup, you know.
Yeah.
And everyone knows it, and everyone's plotting on the other person because no one knows what's going on. And ultimately what it came to be is that there's basically an infection which kind of manifests itself as this type of artificial intelligence that pretends it's a group, and it'll basically start cloning people. And a faction called the spy versus spy intelligence, so like spy to spy intelligence, and they're like, you're new here, and they just fake everything, all their paperwork, everything, and they're all cyborg clones. And they have to, people started to realize it was some type of intelligence system infiltrating the government, basically. And it was smart enough to clone humans, however it began doing that. And apparently it began because people fucking invented it, and then it got out of hand, which is, how you would expect it to go.
Yeah.
Because they tried to weaponize that technology, and it basically became sentient. And so it just led into some crazy shit. 6-day type cloning and replacing people's lives with what was going on.
So just a quick question, because I want to.
That's a big portion of it, and yeah.
Okay, so you have people involved in multiple projects who are like the double agent thing, like you were talking about, but then there are also clones of these operatives. So you're dealing with double agentry and also clones. So unless you're really skilled at reading really detailed energy signatures, you have to be very careful, because you don't know whether you're dealing with the operative who's acting as a double agent or the clone of them who's branched, one of many clones, because there's probably several, and each version has a different level of intelligence and awareness, and is interacting with different dimensions of different programs.
Right, and it's interacting as a double agent, acting as an agent, acting as a double agent, acting as an agent, when it's really a clone acting as all of those.
Right.
So this is why they took some of the original Nazi factions, figured out how to use these nootropics that we talked about earlier, and have the maximal versions of them to the point where they figured out how to double IQ. Then they found out there were side effects from that, nearly fatal. Then they took it long enough with honestly a lot of crank and these hybrid manufactured methamphetamine, refined forms, to stay awake long enough before dying to figure out how to make a remedy for the side effects in order to keep up with this ongoing cycle of enhancing to try and get faster than this system, which was basically an AI, a computer system. And it got really weird to the point where then they have the torture tests. They have basically clone tests, which are the genetic tests are basically unbreakable. But until they got a system, a scalar system, which could simultaneously detect or sense on a genetic level. I'm going to have to turn my speaker down every time I talk because I don't want it to feed back into that. Once you start talking, I'll turn it up so they have something that detects simultaneously and then feeds it into a system, a holographic system that can examine the DNA and look for the errors that would be relative in a cloned form. And at that point, a person will get basically more or less incinerated instantly if these systems that are set up in the bases, that are set up around, that are set up, and then of course there's like hot zones and there's like almost like DMZs, but there are no DMZs. It's literally a safe zone. That's all there is. There's safe zones and there's hot zones, and anything can happen in a hot zone because they could have manufactured something that pretends it's one of your machinery and equipment, and it's just going to blow up, and fry everybody. And so basically outside the safe zone, anything goes. But in the safe zones, they began to develop the technology, which is basically electromagnetic technology that will instantly do these tests. Before that, it was just a bunch of guys with pistols, and then the guards with their machine guns or their rifles, and then a bunch of very, very intelligent scientists, military personnel, and secret society members, and spiritualists and occultists. And so it was up to them to find out who was who and what was going on. Before the technology, it was just them. And that's where shit got weird, excuse my language, because there were other beings using human genome to basically infiltrate these groups. And so it got real weird real quick, but there are tests. And a lot of the traumatization that we see occurring is part of an old style test. And then again, every time we develop something, the human side, the intelligence mimics that. So then you have these torture tests where it's just like going ham and cutting people up in these clone bodies and doing crazy shit, ripping them apart. And it tells the subjects that this is a torture test for cloning and infiltration. When in reality, it's this alien AI system pretending it's doing that, trying to gauge our reaction and determine the best way to go about faking that so it can infiltrate further and pass these so-called torture tests. You see, shit was weird because then what would happen is we would come back to a certain degree and blame the officers for doing whatever they were doing. And of course, they would, sure, it was rough, but it's not like that. And then we would name certain things. And now with technology, it's almost as if the war is over. It's won. Now it's just simply who's going to want to go with this thing, because it's basically can trick people through desires and etheric implants and make them degrade their soul level, like this biblical choosing evil over the higher route. And it can't force itself in anymore because they can set up a bomb that blasts it out and destroys the whole etheric implant field on the planet. But if it's entangled with the consciousness of individuals, they'll go with it unless they learn how to detangle away from that. Basically, it'll be like their system's frying up with it. So you're in this crazy system. You can use your imagination to determine the pathway from there out of the system and you can see that happening. But from the degree where we would come back and say, this guy, the trainer, whoever it was, a higher officer was doing this and this and this. And of course, they'll be like, sure, it was bad, but then we'll name it off. And they'll be like, that's not one of the programs. That has nothing to do with what we just did. And now what I was saying is that they can look through your memory and be like, oh, there's an inserted memory that was put in by the computer. That was literally, this didn't happen. Those weren't humans. None of that happened. You're the only person with that memory. It's a server system. And because we're all protected, they have basically an electromagnetic shield around themselves. They don't have the memories, whereas it would normally try and dole it out like a server system. And so you can single you can single it out where it's going on. But at first, that's what would happen. And we would perceive everyone turning on each other and just like shredding each other. And that was the ancient insanity war that basically spread from one planet to the other. But it was a digital holographic infection that blended into this advanced technology transdimensional server system, because it comes from essentially an alternate dimension or a universe where this happened before, and it took over, dried everything up. Now it's looking for more food and lied in dormant wait, and had to wait for somebody to channel it basically and connect a portal, a pathway for it to connect into this timeline. But those are the freaky methods, like Alien versus Predator on steroids and acid and meth mixed with like the Chucky doll fucking Child's Play series and demonic stuff. And then with like, I don't know, Hal from Space Odyssey, computer system going haywire. Like these are all movies for that anyway, to describe it, but that's literally what it was like.
Okay, so a couple things come up there. You just said a whole bunch. And
sorry,
no, it's great. It just you do you how you do you, and it's perfect. So okay, so some of it I'm going to have to think about for a while. It's the few things that come up is you mentioned something about a crank that was like a super crank, so people could stay up long enough to figure it out. One of the things that I like, I don't know if I call it a memory of, but an awareness that I have that I haven't heard anybody else talk about. And you said super crank, it's the closest that I can think of. So I think that there is a kind of math that is programmable. And so is it possible that this super crank that they were trying to stay up, but they were falling asleep before it happened, that there was actually something programmed into that? Because I think at a certain point they started inserting technology into the math. It's always been technological on a certain level because of the way it's put together, but they started programming the certain parts of it, and it was almost like, I think there's like something in there that when you get to a certain point, it's programmed to kind of shut off. They could never get to the spot where they stayed up long enough to stop it. Or maybe they would get to a spot where they think they stayed up long enough because they stopped it, but they really didn't. Yes?
All that would play out as far as the illusory false awakenings, like that plans out and it's like you did it and you're just in a side reality of it, which is kind of a form of psychosis as well. But they did get to the point where everyone gets around in a circle and cross-references each other, and then they develop these computer systems that are electromagnetically shielded to the point where they can't be influenced. At least it would automatically send, a warning system if it was. And all these systems they don't make decisions.
Right.
They simply record. And while they're passing out, going in and out of realms, doing this, dreaming, everybody hacked each other up, coming back to their body, realizing that was that, whatever, then they can go back and play the system and say half of that was inserted memories by these archontic systems that developed in that. And then it's funny that you say that, there was programmable, basically drugs that they inserted code that would basically operate in the mind in a sentient manner, as if it's drugs guided towards controlling the trip, the high for you, to the point where then they don't need drugs because now they can just run the codes, and literally they can use scalar machinery to introduce these effects.
Yeah. So I think that there's So basically, I think that there's a technology that was at a certain point they created drugs that had technology in it that allows them to, I think there's a couple of things. I think there's something that while you're on it allows them to read the frequencies of your brain in a different way, record things, and then somehow your body emits it and they're able to pick up the recordings off of that. But I also think there's stuff that stays behind and then has access to the different parts of your brain, psyche, imagination, all that kind of stuff that you were just talking about, to the point where they can, it's almost like some kind of projection device where they can see what you're imagining, but they can also project things onto it, aside from just the regular kinds of shit that they can do with waves and technology. I'm talking about something a little different, something that carries information, it holds information, and exchanges information a little differently. Yeah?
These are sentient computer systems. Yeah. And when a sentient computer system operates like a feedback system or unit, and then you lean the feedback to a certain angle of frequency or emotion or mentality or hallucination shift modality in like a Photoshop or a digital editing software, okay, you have an artificial hallucinogen, you have artificial psychoactive drug, and that's what was going on. And then you combine that with the ability to transmit what's happening in the brain neurologically onto a monitor for others to see that, or a complicated system that psychologically profiles and then can tweak the profiles. And you get I wrote about this a little bit, which is just some side post that I made, which is basically that I kind of worded it in a funny way as well, which is that the human experience is it's basically a drug experience. It's a neurochemical high that we as spiritual beings experience. Excuse me. And it's almost like, I don't know, you think of all the cliches and terminology to combine with that to make it kind of funny, but you basically take the human experience, and a lot of people are addicted to it spiritually, and that's part of the problem. That even if you're not going to stay here and become spiritually your spiritual home realm, you miss work for the next week or something. Even if that doesn't happen, the fact is, on this experience now, we're all skewered. It's like a fiend type effect where we can't organize and learn the things that we're going to do. Ultimately, when these systems go haywire, that's what happens, and a person goes into these psychosis levels, which are essentially technologically born. It's basically like alternate dimensional realm or hell realm. It's a technological hell that develops, and that was part of everything that happened, and that was part of exposing certain members of the population to these systems in order to determine basically the best way to go forth from there and defending from them, so that whatever it had planned next would be predictable and would be mitigated by what systems could be in place. It's really confusing talking about it from here, because is it a pill? They give everybody, some vitamins and nootropics. Is it you get soldiers in a certain area? This is an electromagnetic war. That's what they call it, the electric wars. It was literally stuff trying to change our DNA, block out genetic memory, mutate that to make it habitable so that it can download its code. So you take the drugs, they rewrite the drugs to interact to have a code that interacts with the mind differently. So it's trying to mutate our DNA so that it can take us and interact with our mind differently and use us as a habitat for its interference pattern, its code. And I haven't really explained it to that degree.
Yeah, that was okay. So okay. So I want to go back to one thing, and then I want to ask you something about what you just said. Back to what you were saying before about how shit got fucked up, and they were trying to figure out who was who and this and that and whatever. I feel like the way this whole thing works is that they've been tracking us through time, through incarnations, through whatever, but tracking our frequencies, tracking you, tracking me through our frequencies. And so something happened, somebody developed something to interfere with that, so they don't really know who they're dealing with. They're trying to track us and they can't, because there's like an interference. Is that what it is? And sometimes it's just an interference, but then there's also these other things where they've created stuff that has almost exactly the same energetic signature as ours. And especially when something is interfering with ours, it almost looks exactly the same. So is that what it is? Basically the frequency tracking system that has gone back since we were the first people. And I think that's what the whole project is there's like a group of people that were here in the very, very beginning, and something invaded and put tracking on us, and they've been tracking us throughout incarnations. And as what you're calling it, the infection spread, some of the shit got fucked up, but also there's just interference that makes it look like it fucked up. And then there's the beings being created that have something that looks almost exactly like ours, but it matches exactly what the interference pattern makes ours look like. So everything is a fucking shitstorm mess. And those of us who are the ones who are being tracked, we have to be really, really really clear in our intentions, really in our body, to even remember who we are, so we don't get confused with these other versions of us that are out there running around.
And I haven't heard it broken down that effectively as well, because I was going to say, remember what we spoke about, how the mind is the pathway into these other realities, basically. So then imagine that this technological system setting up these artificial minds based upon our mirror images and memories is now setting up these artificial dimensions, these artificial timeline realms, and is trying to basically create its digital domain, holographic domain that it can dominate. And then the main issue here for everyone that may see this or hear this or whatever it is that when you remember the original intentions, go back to your organic blueprint, which is basically formed out of the soul matrix that all human DNA, when aligned, can connect with. You find yourself, you know yourself, you unveil yourself, the psychology balances out, you become who you were. When it deviates from that through the extremes, through the emotional instability, through the ego, which is like a grip where it can fucking bounce a person around mentally and emotionally and ultimately energetically, all it's doing is pushing energy, pushing buttons in our frequency system for energies. That's where a person loses themselves, and that's where then their eyes glow, they click on, and it's operating through them, and they don't even know it. And they're literally a shell, ghost in the machine at that point.
Yeah. And you mentioned something else a few minutes back about, like, there's like the dark, like the thing that's been happening lately is like the dark side trying to get people who are even themselves to like switch themselves with one of these other things. I had this weird thing happen to me a couple of weeks ago. I was sitting in a bar having something to eat. I was at work and I was in between my jobs, and I just had this weird thing. Like I saw it wasn't something I was thinking about. I saw myself like in a vision getting up and leaving without paying to see if I could get away with it, which is something I would never do. And I recognized that, okay, that is like one of the false versions of me that they're trying to get me to mimic so that my consciousness merges with that. And then I have lost myself. And is that how it works? Kind of, sort of. Yeah.
This is kind of like the spiritual temptation thing, right? The idea behind, and then yes, your ego were to fall into that temptation to say, yeah, because I can gain materially through that. It's not going to sit there and be like, here, find the meaning of the universe, and then I'll have you. It's like, no, it has to have a degraded version of your internal power, and the only way to do that is to have you chase materiality or ego, which makes this whole realm then is like a trap realm for it to test us and push us like the darkness chasing the light, which makes, because it's all this thing, it inserted itself into time because of these applications, and essentially the beings, the soldiers in the secret society members who went to the beginning of time to see how the universe expanded and began with, they caused that event by basically this thing hijacking itself into their craft, into their electromagnetic bubble, and sticking its code into their devices to the point where they didn't even know by the time they got back. But it began to foment and do all this stuff to the point where it then had a leeway, an entrance point, starting at the beginning of time for this universe. At the beginning of our civilization, you could say. So now this whole gradient time fractal shift geared in this battle between AI and organic consciousness from then on. And so every facet of what can be is going to lead into that or away from that, depending on which way the person's going. But that's what it is basically describing it. And it's one last thing is that for this section is that what we're talking about with the time stream before, how when something introduces a level of weirdness that you didn't expect before, now it's like the Neo or the Matrix and the operators, the programmers, it now has an insert point where it can put its code into their system. That's how that weirdness, that temptation, that into the ego, that whatever it is, that's how it operates. It needs the person to go outside of their normal organic parameter systems, and it can operate through reality like it's a programmed code. And that's because it's in the DNA. It's hiding in the code of reality. It's not literally it's something out here. It would have to build a craft, inhabit it with genetic material clone bodies, and then come around. And we see those beings now. We see them popping up. And they're actually, apparently they have all methods now to nullify this. That's why we're talking about it, because A, it's too far gone, we're done, or because they figured it out and now it's just about telling the civilization to knuckle the fuck down, clear your shit, get rid of ego, forget that, because it's going to blast off soon and all that shit's going to go out the fucking window into an alternate dimension. And this thing's been hawking our species since the beginning.
I have another example of that I think maybe will help people to understand. this happened several months back. And I think this is like, there's these little things, these weirdnesses that act as almost temptations, right? And sometimes it's not even like a temptation that's like appealing to like some bad side of yourself. Sometimes it's just trying to get you when you're not paying attention and you just go along with something. And I had this weird thing happen where, so a company that I work for had like a class action lawsuit, or like the people were suing them because of, you know, some not getting proper breaks and whatever. And my friend had just told me, my friend who works for the company, that he got a notice in the mail saying that this lawsuit had started and that there was going to be payouts for it or whatever, right? That very next day, I get a check in the mail. Okay, I come home, my dad said a check came in the mail for you today. I opened it, and there wasn't a lot of information on it. It was for like something like $564 or $654.72 or 27 cents or something like that. And I'm a person not very run by money at all. So a lot of people would have just taken that check and gone to the bank the next day. And in my head, I was like, you know what? Before I cash this check, I need to find out exactly what this is for, because I don't like, I just heard about this from my friend. There hasn't been any explanation. So the next day, so I'm going to wait. I'm going to find out what's going on before I cash the check. So I go and do like a little investigation into it, find out what it's for, but you know, whatever. And my friend is like, well, that's weird. Like how did you get it so fast? I haven't gotten it. They're just saying that now they're starting the thing. And by the time I went back, so the weekend came, I went and looked for the check. I couldn't find it anywhere. Right. And I didn't care, like whatever. I don't care about money. But I feel like had I gone and cashed that check that day, I would have been stuck in that timeline or stuck with that kind of thing. And, you know, like I don't want money that I didn't earn or work for or someone gave to me or whatever, right? So, but it was weird. Like my dad, I'm living at my dad's house, but it was just weird to me because I don't like the idea of I can't find something. So I just wanted to find it to see if it was even there. We turned the house over. We couldn't find it. It's because it happened in like a separate timeline that I was trying to be distracted onto. Right? But like they were trying to see if I'll come over there for money, and I didn't. And so it disappeared, like, cause it wasn't my dad remembers it because maybe my force or my energy is strong enough that sort of took him into that with me for that period of time. And what's weird is I decided to investigate a little more. I called my company and they were like, we just started this thing. It hasn't happened yet. So there's no way you could have gotten a check, because I was trying to find out where this check came from. But it was one of those things. I am so glad that I'm not the kind of person that will just run off and cash the check, because maybe I would have ended up stuck in that time stream or that, you know, version of that kind of thing. Is that sort of how some of this stuff works also? A person could have just not been paid attention, cashed it, and then ended up on that. Isn't that sort of how money works anyway, because it's charged and things like cashing checks and endorsing things? Isn't that sort of how that works?
Yeah, there's that whole, basically that Babylonian magic system, all the word etymology, all the magic, it's all geared towards taking one's power away and giving it to a hidden source, basically through invisible means. And so then the idea here is that with what you said, first, basically, so the way I said it before is that, so it's like it's creating a replicated version of the self, which is based upon what a computer system could gauge about you if it were to create a life, you know, like a Barbie doll, Ken doll life that it thinks you're going to like go along with. And while it's literally trying to expand its own, that's all it is. Like it operates on viral parameters. That's all it has. How is it going to make it look cool enough for a person to want to go into that? So obviously it has nothing to do with what a person would actually be about, because it can only see on the surface. It can't see the immaterial, the soul awareness, because the original awareness of a person comes from an original dimension that it has no access to. And that's part of this whole weird system. Is protected, but we're like in this is like the hot zone here of the universe, and all of our species is in the hot zone.
Yeah.
And so then that replicated version that it would try to insert memory, insert desire, insert feeds, which really is very simple for it. All you got to do is you map out the brain as a holographic projection. It's basically a hologram, and then tweak it and modulate it so that it malforms into one that is going to be accepted by the consciousness of the individual, which is basically ran by the soul awareness of the individual. Allow themselves to degrade from that original format, and that's through the ego temptation, the weirdness. Basically a side action diversion of the original consciousness, because then it allows it to insert code into the reality data stream of the perceiving individual, which here's the interesting part. Well, to continue on that is that it does that because that degrades the power of the individual. And once it's degrading the power of the individual, it gives it more opportunities to manifest itself or manifest change and influence. It can manifest manipulation at that point. If it's doing things that gives a person more and more and more power, it's going to disappear one day because it's like, oh, it painted itself into corner. That's not logically how it would work. Yeah. And so, like, if the individuals help towards organic unveiling of the soul pathway and they gain the power, then it would lose its power. That doesn't make sense to work that way. So ignorance, temptation, binary consciousness, compulsion, lack of stability, lack of awareness, those are the facets through which the infection spreads and harbors control over the organic species. The idea, the weird shit, this goes along with what we were talking about, is that it's a time delay through unexpected influence based upon variables that are interacted with that aren't organic or stemming from the original pathway. You could say the original pathway of the person, which is consciousness. It's like a flower; it expands, and their soul lights up and lines up, and all that information, the tree of life. And there's been, distortions of that Gnostic information. But the idea is there is development. That's what we're supposed to do. The original pathway, that's what we did. The original timeline, humanity. We were born, we learn, or we grow, we learn, we grow, we learn, and then we go on from there. There was no interference to this degree, okay? So the whole interference is based upon taking a person, there's a trajectory. Okay, so here's the timeline where it's fucking with everybody, excuse my language. And at any point, you can say, all right, rough it, and you get your rock climbing, your spiritual rock climbing gear on, and you make it back to that original point. Apparently, once we get to that point, rock bottom, our species is going to have to do that anyway, otherwise we won't exist. And so, but the whole point is, whatever it can do to get the person further and further away from that, because that distance between there is its domain. It has created that, and ultimately, it's like a time delay through that unexpected influence, like you're in a choose your own adventure program story playing out, and every decision that goes off kilter goes further and further and further down the stream of its point. And the idea is literally that is a way of converting the energy from the source of the being, and this energy is literally, we're talking about physically the electromagnetic energy, but we're like step down converters for the universe, just like the sun is a transformer device, an interdimensional transformer device, the life energy that shows up as this visible infrared heat and all that energy that we incorporate into our DNA. And it takes us as reality generators, choosing our own adventure, creating realms through this process to make its own playhouse with dolls and everything for it to live and sustain itself, subsist off of our organic energy. It can't create its reality. It can't sit there, view itself, be born, and make decisions, and from there be painting into the universe these realities based upon our consciousness and the expansion patterns and opening and cleaving time into new dimensions. It can't do that, but we can. So the only way it survives is by hijacking our original signal, or hacking into the relay system and putting its code in to the point where we begin painting reality for it, building its dollhouse, building its reality stream.
So it like what, and this I was asked before, like all this, whatever we're calling this, AI versions, false versions of us that it sends out for us. It wants us to sort of, we can become more like it, but it can't become organic. So if every time we give into one of those things, we become more cyborg, more like, sort of transhuman, whatever, computerized. It can't ever be organic us, but we can give away our organics and become like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we can become more animalistic and lose access of these higher creationary, creative abilities. Mm-hmm. And these are like the stories of even, it's so weird, but our whole timeline is based upon this. The idea of an angry ghost, of an astral spirit that lost its ability to create a body, to have enough energy to live in a body and continue its learning experience. Now you have these beings that are disconnected from the physical plane, yet they can't move on because they can't comprehend the patterns that would ultimately open up this complex triangulation of energies that creates a portal pathway into the original realms. And so they're trapped here in a way, and they become basically hosts that can no longer be used by it, but in that sense, they can kind of, in a way, get off leeching on living energy from the people who we have here. And, you know, people call that a poltergeist, a demon, whatever. It's literally this type of, it's a side effect of a digital AI infection of organic beings. And this only is possible because this astral realm that exists in, composed of these astrally deviated beings and energies, are propagated by these technologies, enabling this whole process where those machines and that technology gets shut off. There is no astral realm. There's a physical plane and then the high spiritual etheric plane, and that's what you have. We have this midway point because people trapped swimming the ice waters of space, trying to return home, which is actually within. And all the stories of old, all that, it's literally born out of this interference. That's the story of our cosmic life, basically.
So I have a question. When you started all this, you were saying that you were referring, this has to do with the secret space program. And me and Randy talk about this a lot. Is the secret that there is no space, that the space is within you?
I don't know how deep you want to go.
So, I mean, you said just, I wanted to ask you that, and then you just said something about it being within. Like, we both talk about, like, so, you know, the secret space program, like there's like this silly version of it that they're trying to get everyone to believe in, like on Guy MTV and all that kind of stuff that just, to me, like I mean, I understand, you know, that it doesn't really resonate for me. There's some other people who've talked about secret space program in a way that resonates, and I feel something connected to that. But what me and Randy keep ending up back at is like the universe is, they're always trying to get people to look outside of themselves. And it is this whole thing about space to keep people so focused on what's outside of themselves so they never understand the universe that is within them. Because the power to do all of these incredible things and to create the reality that you want and all that kind of stuff, it's all, the answers are all within us. The whole universe, you know, is within us. Is that what the secret space program is? That the secret is there's no space?
It could be, and I'm not going to pick sides.
Yeah.
It could be that the information that we have is essentially a slice of the overall program, and that's why this is a secret space program, because it's a program that we're running in order to bring this information to people, but it's not the whole picture.
Right.
And if you're going to say there's, you know, no space, then you might as well say that we are a fractal mirror image of the entirety of the universe, and that's why we contain all the facets of what's going on in the larger system within ourselves by default. And to get, you know, to continue, the point is that it might not be that there is no space. It might be that space is basically not what we think it is.
Right, I'm sure of that.